And
Yeah.
one of the best times I ever had in my life, or best I ever felt, was when I felt like I had a really strong connection to a higher power.
Yeah.
And I'd worked on it a lot, and it really came to fruition.
What does the comedian Theo Vaughn think about faith? I was interested in this conversation that he had with Jim Gaffigan, who I think is a funny comedian, and I was like, oh, I like Jim Gaffigan, so I want to listen to Theo Vaughn. And what I found was he had a very interesting take on faith near the end of his conversation around what he sees faith as. And I think this is actually really indicative and emblematic of what some people in culture see faith as. Those who aren't formally or institutionally religious, but who would say that they're spiritual in some sense. So let's watch it.
Yeah, I love faith. I feel like I have a good faith. I like being able to close my eyes and I like to pray twice a day. I like to be able to think about God and talk or my God and ask him what I can do for others and just things like that. Or
The first thing I noticed was he says he has a good faith and that he prays to God or thinks about God and or at least his God. And a part of me thinks about when he says my God. I think he's definitely pushing away from the institutionalization of religion where it's like, well, Christianity says this is God, and really I need God to be something for me. So this is my God that helps me do things in the world and function in the world and society. And I know that I should do good stuff, and that's kind of what my God wants. And I think we live in a culture of people who have their gods, if you will, or there might be a transcendence or a spiritual reality. It makes God seem like he's here to help you out. That God it's more of a transactional thing where it's like, I'm going to do the things that I think will help God or this transcendence give me favor in the world. I think that's what Theo's kind of describing a little bit.
if I need help, to offer me some suggestion. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
One of the best times I ever had in my life, or best I ever felt, was when I felt like I had a really strong connection to a higher power.
Yeah.
And I'd worked on it a lot, and it really came to fruition. And even if some people say, well, that's voodoo, whatever it is, doesn't matter. It worked as much as it was real, as far as I knew. And if that's the truth to me, then that's great.
So what he does there is he describes how even though thinking about God might be a bit wacky and weird, that there's some transcendence in the world, it works. So this is the utilitarian aspect of God. God makes sense because it seems to work for me. And if it works for me, then it must be true. And I don't care what you think. You can think I'm kooky. It doesn't matter. It works for me. I think there's some truth in that, and there's some problematic aspects of that as well. The truth is that, yeah, we were actually created by God to be in relationship with God. And at a base level, at a minimum, humans are better if they are under a transcendent God as opposed to them living life as if they are God themselves. And that can get more specific and more particular if we look at Jesus or the God of the Bible as this specific God who desires and is worthy of our worship and our attention. And that is actually good for us, that we are actually put in our place in a good sense where our pride and arrogance doesn't rise up to the point of thinking that we are the power in the universe, that the world is actually our story. We're not just placed within a grander story in the world. But what Theo does is he sees God as being real to him by helping him out in his past and his present.
Well, it's also, you talk about, you had mentioned before ego, right? Like that humility, or just a concept of humility, is so necessary, right, to navigate this. Because if you let the ego take over,
And what Jim Gaffigan does here is he exactly articulates what I just said, where God actually keeps you in check and keeps your ego in check is what he's saying. But it's still a very utilitarian aspect of who God is and way of seeing God as a transactional thing, like I'm going to use God to better myself. That's not a bad thing in the sense of God will make you better. If you surrender your will over to him and you worship God as opposed to worshiping other things in the world, you will become better. But that's not the sole reason to worship God. But it is a byproduct of that.
it's trouble. You know what I mean? And I know
yeah.
I know that to some people listening, that we just sound like we're saying gobbledygook, but like I've struggled with my ego and stuff like that. It's like the only way you can get that in line is having some humility. And like And the premise of religion that or belief system that there's a higher power is very kind of, it's like that structurally puts you in a position of humbleness.
What Jim is doing there is I think he's describing a trend that's happening within broader culture. What I think is happening, what you see through popular books from maybe Jordan Peterson or books like Dominion, where a case for Christianity and God is being made apart from an actual surrender over to Jesus. If there's this blanket deistic understanding of God, that Christianity has actually helped society and people as a whole, we need to actually go back to that reality because it actually keeps us in check and keeps us balanced. You see, we live in a world of chaos, and I don't think that's too hyperbolic really to say. The future looks really scary, to be honest. AI is developing, geopolitical stuff's going on, there's wars that are happening that haven't happened in continents in 80 years or something like that, and people are feeling like they're disordered in their lives. And so what I've noticed in culture is that, and it's not just me who's noticed this, is that people are actually wanting society to get back to a worshiping of God in some sense, where there's a transcendence above ourselves. But I think it's from purely a utilitarian perspective, as opposed to from a true worship and surrender to Jesus perspective. And these guys are articulating that a little bit more. So do you notice the trends that I'm seeing and that Theo Von and Jim Gaffigan are emblematic of, where people want to use God in a way to better themselves? Where that is not a bad thing necessarily, but it is a bad thing just as the sole pursuit of God. But if we're being completely honest, a lot of us, we've come to God or we've come to Jesus to better ourselves. That's actually our entry point into the kingdom of God. We look at the Gospels, we look at Jesus showing up in people's lives where people are coming to Jesus because they want something from him. But Jesus doesn't leave them there. He takes them on a journey of discipleship. If I was looking at my own life, I know that I came to Jesus because I was scared of dying in hell, to be completely honest. I felt like there was more to life than this, that life was beyond the grave and that there was something beyond death. And Jesus solved that problem for me and made my life better because of that. But he didn't leave me there. He set me on a trajectory of what it looks like to actually follow him and be his disciple. Even though I don't think it's wrong to see God as like not a genie in a bottle necessarily, but as someone to get something from, you shouldn't stay there. You should allow this process of discipleship and journeying with God to take you on a journey of realizing that worshiping God is in of itself the thing that is worthy to be done, and that I can worship God with my entire life. And as a byproduct, he actually makes me better, makes me more into who he has created me to be. So I don't think this is necessarily Jim Gaffigan or Theo Von's definitive opinion on religion. It's clear that they're on a journey, but there were some cultural touch points that I thought were really interesting that I see elsewhere in culture as well.